I actually entered this field, which is deeply humanitarian and community-oriented, through an interest in the environment. In the early 90s, I was increasingly frustrated that people seemed to care about the environment, but we had no good way of doing anything about it, particularly at a policy level. And I started investigating why that could be so. Really passionate people could go out on Earth Day and wave their arms, but our laws didn't change commensurate with the kinds of threats we were seeing to the environment. In '93, I came across some literature that began to make sense of this to me. We have a very concrete measure of our economic health, or at least it's not perfect, but the GDP, the gross domestic product, measures all of the exchanges of money that people make for each other and adds them all up, no matter whether I'm giving you money or you're giving me money, that exchange gets counted into the GDP. And at the end of every year, we total it all up and we say it went up or it went down by this much. And all of the economists who invented the GDP have always said this is not really a good measure of progress or how good things are. It is solely a measure of what our economy is doing. But our policymakers, who are not always so subtle in their thinking, have used it from its inception as a measure of well-being and of progress. The difficulty is it's very powerful. When you have a number and politicians can pull up charts and graphs and they put the number up there, it's very hard for people who get up and say, but our animals are dying and our water is not clean anymore and people are having health problems from the environment. If you don't have any number, or particularly if you don't have a single number to weigh against the GDP, the issues don't remain in the public dialogue. They evaporate. While I was reading about that relating to the environment, it became clear that exactly the same problem existed for our social well-being, our social capital. And the language that I began to understand best was that because we were blind to social and environmental capital, our economic world was beginning to cannibalize those things that were invisible to us. So there was an article written, if the GDP is up, why is America down? And it really detailed what was happening. So for example, the Exxon Valdez oil spill, which destroyed enormous amounts of environmental capital and in indigenous communities in Prince William Sound, social capital as well. That was invisible at the same time that the GDP went up a great deal because so much money was spent on cleaning up Prince William Sound after the spill. I looked around to see if there were what they called indicators, a sort of starchy term, but the big indicator for the economic world is the GDP. Were there indicators that we could use for the environment? And at that time I concluded probably not, and it's still a big difficulty for the environment. But Edgar Kahn, whose name is going to be up on one of these slides, had recently invented this thing called time dollars or time banking, where neighbors, based on a system of reciprocity, create their own economics, their own currency, and they exchange services for one another. And it's not one based in self-interest, the way our formal economy is. We have another economy called the volunteer economy, and that's based in altruism. We understand both of those really well. We understand dealing with our self-interest and being kind to other people. But the one which used to dominate humankind's interactions, which was reciprocity, has been lost to us largely because it was really cannibalized or taken over by the formal economy, not through anybody's fault, by the way, but because the formal economy was such a powerful tool. It was the hammer that made everything else look like a nail, and the informal or core economy gradually declined to the point where most people forgot about it. So by simultaneously introducing a currency whereby reciprocity was encouraged and also measured through counting up the time dollars that were exchanged in precisely the same fashion that we exchange regular dollars, it seemed to me that we might be able to create a proxy for social capital and social well-being that could, in the policy circles, counteract some of the excess weight of the formal economy. So based on that, and it's terribly abstract sounding, although it matters a great deal to our future, I decided that I would try this. It had been tried in a few communities around the US, and it made sense to me to bring it to my hometown. I live in Falmouth. And so starting in I think it was 95, we first introduced time banking, and we've been going ever since then with greater and lesser success over time. It turns out it isn't simple to create a new economy. But that's how we got started. I would have to say that I do not yet see this alternative indicator entering policy discussions in a way that acts as an effective counterbalance to the formal economy. But at least now, as Ed will be telling you, the movement is beginning to spread. And if it spreads far enough and becomes ordinary enough for people to not only live in self-interested relation with one another, but mutually interested relation with one another, we may be able both to measure and to sustain and grow our social capital that has been lost. That's the great hope. I would say that the jury is still out as to whether we'll succeed in this, but it still feels to me as though it's a worthwhile undertaking. I'm going to stop on that, but I will say to you, if this broader context does interest you, Stuart Wallace, the founder and head of an organization in the UK called the New Economics Foundation, is coming to Portland to give a talk at the Irish Heritage Center on May 20th, and I've left some little leaflets out in the on the table out there. Ed has been kind enough to allow me to do that. And I hope that you will come if this does interest you and bring your friends. He's an extraordinarily good speaker. He's really his context is even broader. It's how can we lead good lives without destroying the earth. So you can't get much broader than that. As I say, I hope you will come. Now I'm going to introduce Ed, and it's a great pleasure to do so. Ed has become a colleague over the last few years through our association with time banking. Ed grew up in Southern California, the son of a unionized carpenter and of a mother who re-entered the labor force to enable him to go to college. His first love was music, but he became more and more drawn to sociology while in college. He went on to earn his PhD in the same from the University of California, Riverside in 2001, and was hired pretty much right away as assistant professor of sociology here at USM. He, his wife, Dina, and their newborn daughter, Hannah, took the plunge and moved 3,000 miles to Portland, so we are lucky to have him. In 2006, Ed received the Emerging Teacher Scholar Award from USM's College of Art and Sciences. In 2007, he was promoted to associate professor, and in 2008 was elected chair of sociology here. He was recently elected president of the USM chapter of UFUM, which is the faculty union at USM. Last year, Ed was awarded USM's first Provost Research Fellowship. He specializes in social movements, social inequality, and the sociology of work. Ed's research interests include alternative social movements and grassroots initiatives to empower the marginalized. Ed has studied local currencies most intensively while at USM, but this particular interest dates all the way back to 1996, when he began reading about alternatives to capitalism. Ed joined the Maine Time Dollar Network in 2004, and we invited him to join our board of directors of what is now known as Our Exchange Portland in 2007. He has published 6 articles on local currencies and is considered a leading expert in the US on this topic. He's been interviewed over 30 times by mainstream media about this concept of communities creating their own money. Ed is here tonight to present findings from his forthcoming book, equal time, equal value, building healthier communities through time banking. So I'd like you to join me in welcoming Ed Collom.
Thank you, Richard, for that wonderful introduction. I don't think I would be here this evening if it wasn't for Richard, and he's given tremendous time and energy to this movement and is responsible for bringing time banking to Maine and has been at it for many, many years. And I thank you for your generosity and all you've done, Richard. Thanks. This project, as Richard noted, goes back a number of years, and so you saw in the opening there several slides of acknowledgments, and time banking really is first and foremost a community. And so I've had the great fortune to meet a number of wonderful people, and I've gained a lot of insight by just hanging out at our Exchange Portland office and its various locations, and the staff has just been amazing. And it's really the best way to learn about local currencies is to join one and to be active. And so I have many people to thank. And this project is actually a co-authored book project. This is the forthcoming title, as Richard mentioned. And my co-authors, Judy Lasker and Corrine Krakio, have been working a lot on this as well. So what I plan on doing here this evening is, first of all, I'll give a quick background, talk about some of the possible benefits of local currencies, talk about the major different forms we find here in the United States, as well as some of the challenges. As Richard mentioned, these systems are not easy to start and maintain. So I'll start off with some of the challenges, and then get into some of the data analysis and talk about the type of data we have collected. And I have lots of findings for you this evening, so hopefully it doesn't put anybody to sleep. But the way that I came to thinking about studying this was in four major chunks. And so looking at the demographics of participants, looking at motivations about why people join, looking at the transactions themselves, and then looking at the outcomes, really, what do participants get? And these answer bigger questions like, do these things work? Okay, and then it'll have some implications and so forth. So in general, what we find these days is very interesting in that in communities across the globe, people are literally creating their own currencies. These are non-cash exchange networks. These are part of a larger do-it-yourself movement, and they're established primarily to build social capital and to make goods and services more accessible. So the two main goals have been economic empowerment and community building. And the basic argument is that federal dollars are scarce, as we all know, while time and skills are often plentiful. This is a quote down here that many in the movement are very familiar with, that Edgar Kahn has distributed widely. We have what we need if we use what we have. And it's kind of a nice overview about the way in which time banking in particular works.